Thank you. I'm going to call to order the Committee of the Whole meeting of the Park Ridge City Council Finance and Budget and Procedures and Regulations Committee of the Whole. Roll call, please.
Alderman Moran.
Here.
Melissus.
Here.
Schubert. Mazuka.
Here.
Meladosian.
Here.
Wilkening. Joyce. Mayor Maloney.
For the record, Mayor Maloney is en route. His plane landed at 6:30, so it's probably just getting to its gate at O'Hare now, but he'll be here as quick as he can. First item up is citizens wishing to be heard on a non-agenda item. Do we have anybody who wishes to speak to the council tonight? Sir, if you'd approach, name and address for the record, and as a reminder, you've got 3 minutes, so let me get my stopwatch going, and you can start anytime.
Okay. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you tonight regarding 400 Talcott Road. My name is Neil Wagner, and I live at 414 Talcott Place. I speak for many of my fellow residents when I say the zoning certificate process for this property has been compromised, and we request the opportunity to appeal a zoning administrator determination before the Zoning Board of Appeals. The city has previously denied us this option on the grounds that our application missed the deadline for submission, but I know you and all of Park Ridge's governing officials value fostering a culture of honesty, integrity, transparency, and accountability. And when you review the city's failure to consistently maintain those principles in dealing with our pursuit of an appeal, I'm confident you'll agree that our appeal should have its day. First, integrity. The integrity of the process has been compromised by ongoing conflicting information about how the process works. A couple of examples. We'd been told a zoning certificate would not be issued for the property. Then we were later told one would be issued for the property. We were told we'd need to submit our appeal within 30 days of the certificate's issuance, yet it was literally impossible for us to know when the certificate was issued despite our many efforts to be notified. Which brings me to transparency. The zoning certificate was issued December 16th, 2016. Despite our regular ongoing inquiries about the pending certificate's status before and after that date, despite the city's assurances that it would do everything in its power to keep us informed, despite our regular monitoring of the city's online postings, and despite a FOIA report given to us 3 days after the certificate was issued, the city did not acknowledge that a certificate was issued until 5 months after the fact. The lack of transparency in the process of issuing this zoning certificate was the sole reason the appeal was not filed within 30 days of the issuance. Finally, accountability. Park Ridge has laws on its books that restrict relative setback, scale, and size. To date, no one has been accountable for enforcement of these laws. The responsibility was removed from the Appearance Commission's purview just before they reviewed the project. The city told us at that time that the zoning administrator is now accountable. ZBA was created as a check and balance to that accountability. We respectfully ask that the city give this appeal the opportunity to be heard that it rightly deserves. I'll provide a handout that will feature the key concerns about 400 Talcott Road that I addressed here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. If you have a handout, just hand it that way and we'll get it around here. All right. Anyone else wish to speak? Sir, name and address if you wish to give it.
Yes, I'm Ron Reinhardt. I'm at 413 Talcott Place. Mr. Wagner just set out some of the issues with 400 Talcott Road. I have 5 questions because I'm looking into this matter and I'm a little confused. First question, does Park Ridge intend to require compliance with the urban design guidelines referenced in the city code? If so, who is going to enforce these guidelines? We tried to get them enforced in front of the Appearance Commission, and the city attorney told us they were going to be enforced by the zoning board or the zoning commissioner. The zoning commissioner hasn't enforced them, though. Are they going to be enforced? I think the citizens should know whether or not these guidelines are going to be enforced by Park Ridge. Secondly, second question, as Mr. Wagner laid out, we were given incorrect information on when the building process, the zoning certificate would be issued. The city gave no notice, even though the staff knew residents were interested, and the director expressly affirmed that the city would give us notice of a zoning certificate. The city, according to the director, has no system so that that specifically publishes the fact that a zoning certificate is being issued, and the city failed to produce the zoning certificate even in responding to a timely FOIA request and at a time when the residents would have been able to file an appeal. So my next question is, what do you propose to do to remedy those specific problems and failures by the staff, and not only in the case of 400 West Talcott, but also going forward? Third question, more broadly, do you think it is fair or appropriate to tie the clock for resident zoning appeal rights to a certificate that Mr. Brown can apparently sign and then put in a file in his desk? And residents have no knowledge of what happened, because that's what happened here. We tried to get the information, and it just wasn't forthcoming. My submission is that's not a good basis to start a clock for a zoning appeal, and certainly would never be tolerated by an administrative agency or court. Fourth question, if the 400 West Talcott building goes forward as presently approved, it is going to reduce the setback for every new building on that block, because it's going to bring the setback probably up to the sidewalk. So it's not just 400 West Talcott, it's also other properties and owners who may choose to develop in a similarly inappropriate way. Is the city council going to do anything about that? It's not just one monstrosity, it's multiples that we're looking forward to. Fifth question, I'm really puzzled that the director of zoning can deny and reject an appeal on his own. In this case, the director issued the zoning certificate without notice to
Correct.
residents.
You're at 3 minutes, so I need you to wrap it up.
You know, it's okay. I will do it. The director participated in the misleading FOIA response 3 days later that did not include the zoning certificate, and he's apparently chosen not to apply the urban design guidelines. I don't think it's appropriate that that director also control who gets to talk in front of the zoning board of appeals. Again, very unusual procedure that access to the board can be blocked by a staff member. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Seeing none. We're on to finance and budget. The first item tonight in finance and budget is an action item. I move to approve the FY17 year-end budget amendments.
Second.
Thank you. Andrea, if you could take us through.
At the last Finance Committee of the whole meeting, I explained that there commonly are some budget amendments that happen at the end of the year as we post year-end entries. There were 2 additional invoices that came in since the last meeting that require budget amendments. So we are within compliance of the municipal code as far as budgetary limits. Those are explained in the attached memo, and I can answer any questions on those items.
First, let me just let the record reflect. Mayor Maloney has joined us. Any questions from the alderman or the mayor on this? Seeing none, out to the audience on budget amendments. Seeing none, back to council for comment. Very well. And as a budget amendment, is this final action, so I need to do this as roll call, or can I do this as voice? This is not final, so I can do this as voice.
That's fine.
Very well. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? Passes. Next item up, I move to approve FY17 to FY18 carryover budget amendments.
Second.
Thank you. Andrea?
These are also budget amendments. They're just, I guess, a special category of them. And the criteria to qualify as a carryover budget amendment is explained in the memo. These are essentially items that were budgeted and either started or right at the end of FY17, or for staffing reasons or timing reasons, we weren't able to start until May, which is the next fiscal year. So we are just asking to carry the funds over from the FY17 budget into FY18, amend the FY18 budget so we can accomplish the goals and the items.
Thank you. Questions from the council? I have a question for the city manager, Joe, on motor equipment. There are quite a few items on here that are carryover for either purchase or upfitting. You know, and certainly for the ones that are upfitting cases, are those due to come back to us very soon? Or, so, I mean, I just am wondering, you know, with, you know, winter's a long way off, but it's not, it's never that far off in Chicago. Are we going to be able to knock all of these out fairly soon?
Yeah, we are definitely focused on getting these all knocked out, and we've had several meetings already expressing our desire and goal of reducing the amount of carryover that we have next year. So I anticipate that these things will be coming back to council soon, and that the carryover will be reduced next year.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any questions, any more questions from the council? Seeing none. Out to the audience, question or comment? Seeing none. To the council for vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Oppose? Passes. Next item up, I move to approve the purchase order for one X-Series manual monitor defibrillator with accessories from Zoll Medical Corporation, Chelmsford, Massachusetts, in the amount of $31,853.36.
Second.
Thank you. If it's a defib machine, it's Jeff. Jeff, tell us about it.
Sure, thank you. This is a cardiac monitor defibrillator, a Zoll X-Series. It is being placed on the rescue vehicle when that arrives. This unit can only be purchased directly from the manufacturer. That's how all monitor defibrillator companies work. It needs to be the same as what we are using because of the equipment interchangeability between the fire vehicles, the ambulances, and et cetera. This unit does everything for us in terms of cardiac care. It's cardiac monitor with 12-lead capability. It does capnography, defibrillation, pacing, SpO2, carbon monoxide monitoring, and takes blood pressures as well. So it does pretty much everything we need it to do. We're seeking approval because we need it, and we're trying to avoid a price increase at the end of the month.
Thank you. Questions from the council? Okay, I have some questions on this one. You're not actually transporting anyone in the reserve vehicle, are you?
In the rescue vehicle?
Rescue vehicle.
That's correct.
So this defib machine, this is the same machine you normally put in an ambulance that would communicate, I think, in the past, I think you've mentioned, that communicates with the hospital ahead of time or in real time as you're bringing somebody in with an issue?
So, correct. We have 3 transport-capable ambulances. 2 of them are in service at all times. We have all of our fire suppression vehicles, our tower ladder and our fire engine, are also advanced life support. So, among the advanced life support equipment that we are required to carry and that aids us in giving good care, the monitor defibrillator is part of that
Okay.
package.
But I guess what I'm getting at is you're putting it on a vehicle that's never going to transport somebody.
That's correct. There's advanced life support equipment on our non-transport vehicles, and that's pretty standard.
Do you have one of these? So you have this this type of monitor defib machine on the tower ladder and all the other stuff too?
And on the engine as well, yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other questions? Mayor Maloney.
Chief, you mentioned we're doing this to avoid a price increase at the end of the month.
That's correct.
Do you know what the price will be increasing to?
I'm just speaking with the acting finance director. My best guess would be about $3,000 more.
Okay. And is the approval tonight enough? This isn't final action, is it?
We think we're okay if we get a hold of them tomorrow and tell them that it passed committee.
Okay. And I don't mean to be snarky, but it does say on their quote, which is dated June 9th, that their quote is valid for 60 days. So you've got that up your sleeve if they give you a hard time.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the council? Seeing none. Out to the audience for question or comment. Back to council. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Oppose? Moves forward. Next item up, I move to approve a 5-year contract for cloud backup storage, FN-FY18-01 to MNJ Technologies Direct Incorporated of Buffalo Grove, Illinois, in the amount of $39,539.26.
Second.
Thank you. Andrew?
Staff issued an invitation to bid for cloud backup storage. 10 bids were opened and read aloud, and staff is recommending that the contract be awarded to the lowest responsible bidder that provides the best value for the city. We are asking for a 5-year service contract for cloud storage. That puts us in the same time frame as the warranty for the software that will be used for it. So the hardware, the software will all be on the same time frame. The bid tabulation scorecard is attached to the package, and I can answer any questions on those items.
Okay. Alderman Moran?
So I just, 5 years is usually a pretty long period of time for us to lock in on something like this. And I saw in here that it had, the city is purchasing the hardware and a 5-year warranty for the hardware. Is that what it comes with? So that's why we're doing it, or did we choose 5 years and we can get the warranty for any period of time we want?
The stated warranty was 5 years, and the software life is 5 years. So to have the same hardware to go with the software and have both under warranty for the same time period,
Okay.
we thought was the best option for the city.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
A couple questions for you, Andrew. The winning bid, this is not an annual cost. This is one time for 5 years, $39,000.
I believe that's the case, yeah.
Okay. And then the other question, so anyone who is looking at the scorecard would probably notice that there's a kind of a giant spread between the top and bottom bidder here. The highest bid came in at $181,000, the lowest right around $40,000. So are we confident that all the bidders understood what we were asking them to bid on, or what kind of feedback did you get in this that would tell us, yeah, we spec'd this correctly and everybody understood it, and there's just a wide dispersion of price, or people didn't understand what we were asking them for?
We felt that it was clearly stated. We stated we wanted basic cloud services, and we stated that our desired budget was $40,000. The higher bids that you see for $95,000 and over, they included deluxe services. We don't need deluxe services because Prescient, we already have our IT provider, and they provide the technical service to get the data to the cloud and back from the cloud. And that both of those were stated clearly in the bid. The basic services that we had, IT that was available, that would be providing the data to and from, and the $40,000 desired budget.
So they didn't quote it kind of as a line item where you could exclude that deluxe service?
No,
They just bundled it all together?
yes.
Okay. So they kind of sort of misunderstood the bid by bidding a service we
or
already
they
had
don't
and
do
didn't
things that way.
request.
I guess you could say that.
Alderman Moran?
So Prescient has been involved in this,
Oh,
and they're comfortable with what you're recommending, and
Yes.
they'll, okay, because that makes me feel a little bit better on this end. And also, I just watched the last episode of Silicon Valley, which if any of you have ever watched that, last night, it was all about, like, basically they were storing data on smart fridges, and I just want to make sure that this isn't going to be in somebody's garage. We're
I'm
confident
confident
this
Prescient's
is,
ability and guidance
Prescient
in
knows
this.
that this will be safe and we're good.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Meldows?
Did we get, I didn't know if Mr. Gilmore clarified, did we get confirmation that the 40 grand is a 5-year total cost?
Yeah, it's
We pay?
the grand total for the whole
Okay.
all 5 years, yeah.
And Andrew, can you help me understand, this is for cloud storage, but you're talking about some hardware, some software, and some warranty on the hardware. Is that something we've purchased already separately? Or is this cloud storage that we have some hardware and software and hardware warranty bundled into this for 5 years?
This is specifically for the hardware and the storage. The software, and I would have to check with IT to get the specifics, but I believe that's something we already have, we have access to.
So this is hardware up in the cloud and which includes the storage and the warranty on the hardware we're buying?
Yes.
That. And do we know if, like, the vendors, given the large range, were bidding on the same volume of storage or bandwidth and the ability to recall it? It was all apples to apples, other than the, premium level service?
The desired level that IT feels that we need was stated in the RFP, and all of the bidders said that they can provide that level of coverage and storage.
And then, lastly, do we know where this storage is gonna be?
I do not know the answer to that, but I could look into it and get back to you.
My only concern is we advertise this locally and got looks like a bunch of local companies to respond, that we would geographically want that backup solution outside of the Chicago metropolitan area.
I can get back to you on that.
Okay, so we'll have that as a takeaway. Right, so if we can add that to the memo for next time, that would be appreciated. Any other questions from the Alderman? Seeing none, out to the audience. Back to the council. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Done. Next item up is the strategic plan update. I've asked for this since I think our calendar says we're getting close, so Andrea, if you could tell, or Andrea or Joe?
Yeah, I can just speak to this. It's just a verbal update. I know that you had, Alderman Mizuki had asked for an update. The handbook for elected officials talks about the fact that we will conduct strategic planning discussions in the month of July. Our plan this year, coming off of the comprehensive strategic plan that we did last year, was to bring back in July, at the July Finance and Budget COW, the final strategic planning report that we just completed at the end of the calendar year. And to go over the findings and the recommendations that came out of that strategic plan, to kind of bring everybody up to speed. We've got some new folks on the council, get everybody, kind of have a discussion about what the Tier 1 goals were. There were, I think, there were 16 goals that were identified as Tier 1 goals, and those are the goals that we built the FY18 budget on. So we want to reiterate those, make sure everyone's aware of them, kind of go back through how they tie out to the FY18 budget that we're pursuing right now. And then that discussion would be our strategic plan refresher for this year.
Now, is that going to be a staff-led discussion, or are we going to have a facilitator like last time?
It would be a staff-led discussion. So,
All right, very well. Any other questions in the council around where we're going with this? Okay. Next up is the human resources update. So, who'd like to give this?
Yeah,
one?
I can run through this.
Oh.
The report is here, the notable items. The city continues to negotiate with the ICOPS union. Our next meeting is scheduled for July the 10th. And after that, I would think that we would have an update that we can bring to the council sometime probably late July, mid to late July. The middle section there talks about staffing changes. We have had numerous folks retire, and you can see there a lot of years of service, 32 years, 29 years, and 37 years. And then we've had a few folks join the organization, and we are seeking some, we still have a few openings that we're recruiting for. From the pension side, the next police pension board meeting, quarterly meeting, is on July the 26th, 10 a.m. in City Hall, second floor conference room. And the fire pension board, next quarterly meeting will be August 8th at the Fire Station 36. So if anybody has any questions about the report, I can try to answer those for you. Otherwise, feel free to read that at your leisure.
Questions from the council? Seeing none, we'll move forward. The last item is the department head report, and I think some progress on one of those strategic items to report. So take us through the citizen self-service pilot update.
Just wanted to report that the citizen self-service pilot has been very successful to date. We have 45 people that signed up. 30 signed up for the first billing cycle for the bills that were mailed on June 1st, and another 15 signed up for the bills that will be mailed on July 1st. And everything is flowing and operating as we hoped and planned that it would. The payments are coming in, they're flowing into our bank account. And the feedback that we're getting is all minor customer service questions that I think would be expected. People having questions on finding the routing number or, on their credit card information and how to enter it, that type of thing. But based on that, we are going to wait another month to go through the second cycle of billing, and then we would be on target to roll it out citywide shortly after that.
Great. Joe, anything you want to add to that, or we're good?
No.
All right, wonderful. Questions from the council? Okay. With that, we conclude finance and budget.
Good evening. We've got a couple of things on our agenda here. First of all, action items. I don't believe is there anything, Jim? No. Then we come to our discussion items. The first is options for Murphy Lake protection. Would you like to speak on this, Jim?
Well, I'll start. I'll just give a brief background, if I may. This issue was before the Committee of the Whole in April, at the April meeting. At that time, I provided an outline of the history dating back about 20 years on Murphy Lake and a resolution that was approved by the City Council. I also stated staff's opposition to any type of regulation on Murphy Lake. When I say staff, I'm referring to myself, Public Works Director, City Engineer, and both of our city attorneys. And that opposition still remains. There was a memo prepared by our city attorneys that was upon request of the Committee of the Whole last time. The original packet that went out had a memorandum dated May 8th. There had been an updated memo dated May 11th. I distributed that to each of your places tonight. I think they're basically the same memo. The original memo had a statement that there were certain restrictions recorded against each of the properties. That was incorrect. And I think Adam Simon can elaborate a little bit more on the memo and its options and any other changes between the May 8th and May 11th versions.
So Director Brown's correct. The clarification on the recording is that there was a resolution adopted by the Homeowners Association. It was recorded, but it was only recorded against the property owned and controlled by the association. This is a map of Murphy Lake where the small box is north. And the association itself owns a significant majority of the water. The homeowners' lots certainly go into the water to some degree, but the homeowners association itself owns most of the water, and the resolution and the corresponding restriction on fill does apply to the property owned by the association. So that's something that was new information which wasn't available in April. The remainder of the memo describing the options to the city, the three options that we've identified, and the pros and cons is essentially the same. with the caveat that there's a limitation on the applicability of the restrictions because it was recorded against the water primarily, not against the private lots.
Any alderman comment?
Well, I'll just make one, since this kind of bridges our
Yes.
time as P&R chairs. You know, when I was, when this last got brought up, the direction of the council was that we would try to, you know, no pun intended, jump into the middle of this lake issue. But I think what has happened since that time, one, we have some new members of the council, and I think, Jim, you had indicated to me that there was some new information that was important for the council to weigh, and maybe some individuals that wanted to speak on the other side of this issue. And so that was where it was left when I moved, and I think that what you've done, Madam Chair, is to pick up that string from that point.
So what you're saying is that, are there any other aldermen? Yes, sir.
I had a question just for our city attorney, but I don't know if you want to expand on that, or are we,
What should we,
was that a question mark or just more of a comment?
It was more of a procedural comment to explain how we've handed this off between the two chairs.
Yep, because one of the situations I know that some of the residents brought up last time they were here was, you know, I'm across the lake from Charlie, and we want to just build out, and basically create a bridge across to each other, but it looks like based on what the association owns, that wouldn't be possible, is that correct?
That's my opinion.
Okay.
Unless the association granted permission to do that.
Right. But then there's also, you know, I guess, what is it, option 2, where it says the association could enforce existing private restrictions. They really can't, that option has lost some of its bite, if I'm interpreting this correctly, because they don't actually, some of those homes that are around there have the ability to fill in up to close to the border of whatever, or to the border that the association owns.
to their property line?
So the property lines for most of the homes around the lake go into the water. Certainly, they own the lake bed to some degree. What you're overlooking in that comment, though, is that there are other restrictions that the city enforces from MWRD in terms of stormwater and floodplain regulations that inherently limit how much fill is allowed to be put in the lake, separate and apart from any zoning regulations the city enforces. So while the city doesn't have its own rules, it does help enforce through Public Works and Engineering, the MWRD floodplain regulations and stormwater regulations. You certainly can't just drop fill into, you know, raise the level of a piece of property to.
But didn't some property, isn't that why this is brought up, is some property actually just did that and got approval from the city to do it?
Well, they put a flood wall in a few feet out into the water.
So they filled in part of their property and raised the level of the lake for everyone else?
Can you give some more perspective on the degree of?
Right, there's a certain amount of erosion that's occurred and continues to occur around the lake that's sizable enough that there's wave action and wind action that causes properties to erode. And the permit that was applied for and issued last December, was to establish, kind of reestablish the shoreline, put in a shore wall, seawall and other measures to arrest the erosion and replace what had been eroded away. That's basically what occurred. It went through an engineering review.
I never thought we'd hear the phrase seawall in a Park
A
Ridge City
seawall
Council
in Oak
meeting.
Park, yeah, correct, yeah.
Alderman Mizuko.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, just to clarify, and maybe Jim, you can clarify this as well. I thought that there's no real MWRD or stormwater issue with this particular property because it doesn't lead to anything. It's not a navigable water of the United States. It doesn't, you know, there have been some Supreme Court things. So there's no jurisdiction for MWRD to rules to be involved here. Is that?
Yeah, that's correct. It goes to our engineering department for a review, and I couldn't say off the top of my head if they sent, you know, some reviews they sent out to a consultant. in any event, it came back approved by engineering. There was no flooding concern, as you indicated. There's no water that flows into this lake, and it doesn't connect with anything else. It does not serve a stormwater management function as well. And the activity along the shoreline was minimal, extremely minimal, and a permit was issued.
Thank you.
I will note, if I may, that most of the properties around the lake do have seawalls or some other form of riprap for erosion control.
Anybody else up here?
I just-
Yes.
I appreciate Director Brown's legal opinion on that, but I just want to get confirmation from council that you concur.
So where you have, the Supreme Court decisions that Alderman Mazuka refers to deal with the separation between federal jurisdiction and state jurisdiction, and where something is a navigable water under the U.S. Environmental Protection Act, it puts the jurisdiction before the Army Corps of Engineers. Where there's an isolated body of water that doesn't contribute to navigable waters, that's under the state and through delegation to local regulatory bodies. In this case, this body of water is not designed as a regional stormwater management facility, so MWRD might not exercise jurisdiction there. It certainly does not have Army Corps jurisdiction at all. And MWRD may not choose to exercise jurisdiction because of the isolated purpose of it.
So you don't feel there's any national or state or regional ordinance that would prohibit a resident from filling in their property 20 feet out if they own that property?
There's certainly no federal legislation that applies to this body of water. Whether or not MWRD would exercise jurisdiction if someone tried to fill in the entire rectangle of their property, I can't speak for them. But again, it's not part of a regional stormwater system, so they might recuse themselves from it, but I can't speak for them if there's, some extraordinary fill event that occurs.
Alderman?
I guess, I apologize if I'm not understanding something here, but I'm hearing two sides of this. I'm hearing that there are MWRD regulations that the city would use to enforce and could keep people from filling in, but then MWRD has no standing, and if we tried to enforce those regulations, they might not even bother getting involved. So then I'm just to kind of conclude where my head's going, then it basically becomes, well, then it is the city's enforcement. Our decision to enforce MWRDs, even if they're not going to enforce it, in which case, then why wouldn't we set the bar wherever we want to set the bar at that point?
So let me take a step back and start broad and then get specific.
Sure.
So where a body of water or where a man-made or natural body of water is part of the floodplain stormwater management system, MWRD enforces regulations designed to protect downstream, downwater property owners to make sure that surface water runoff is substantially the same post-development as pre-development.
Okay.
Right? So to the degree that there's development activity that affects the stormwater system or building in a floodplain, they have ordinances that govern building in the floodplain, building in the floodway, that cause impacts on stormwater detention and retention. That's a general umbrella statement.
Got it.
I have not, Director Brown says that MWRD won't enforce jurisdiction in this body of water because it's not part of a stormwater system. And apparently, because it's so isolated and doesn't contribute to the city's stormwater detention or retention system, they have decided that they just choose not to enforce, choose not to exercise jurisdiction there.
Thanks.
I had a question. I know you've kind of covered it in the memo, but I just wanted to clarify whether the private solution to this? So in other words, do these owners have any recourse if the city was to not step in? And we've seen something here saying that, you know, they could try to enforce what was previously established and recorded against its own properties. That would be what, civil action in court?
So, first, with respect to the property owned by the association, they have absolute control over the property they own,
Okay.
so they can enforce the restriction against the property they own, the lake, part of the lake bed they own.
Okay.
So they certainly can't build a bridge.
So nobody can go land, but try to fill the middle of the lake, basically.
Correct, they can't do that. Furthermore, if a majority of the homeowners out there decided to adopt a restrictive covenant that would apply to all the private properties, there is a procedure available to them to do that. So there's a remedy available that just has not been exercised correctly, at least heretofore.
And then, was there another option? And then finally, an individual that is in Murphy Lake, the subdivision, can attempt to enforce the existing private restrictions as a breach of contract claim, and that's a civil action.
That's a civil action.
Okay.
Just want to make sure I have this clear. Enforce the existing property restrictions established and recorded against its own properties. So that's just the middle of the lake, the area that they own.
So
There really isn't any restrictions placed on the properties that are along the water. Other than you can't go out into the middle of the lake. You can go up to your property line.
So the history of this is hazy, so I apologize.
Yep.
And we don't, and this hasn't been challenged, so we don't have a case to point to say what the clear answer is. Historically, the homeowners around the lake adopted a resolution intending to restrict fill around the lake. Regardless of what their intent was, they adopted a resolution, and when they recorded the resolution, they recorded it only against the property owned by the association. That might have been imperfect on how they executed that, but there was a resolution adopted by the association at that time. Could an attorney express a claim in contract saying that the association adopted a rule and our intent was imperfectly recorded, but nonetheless it's a rule between the people who voted for it? I don't think it would be laughed at, frankly. It's possible. It's not the strongest enforcement action in the world.
Sure.
But there was an intent at the time to enforce a generally applicable restriction. It just was imperfectly recorded.
But the city council took action through form of a resolution, not an ordinance, in order to step in and regulate infill activities on the lake. I guess I haven't seen that ordinance.
There was a resolution directing the Director of Public Works on how to
Not approve.
not approve a permit.
Gotcha, okay. Got it.
Well, that's,
And as the memo expresses, it's our opinion that that resolution that was adopted
98.
in '98 is unenforceable.
Put them in Melodos.
And as I recall from the prior conversations too, anything the association wants to do in terms of whatever rule they want to pass is unenforceable, because at least in one of the two lakes we're talking about, membership in that association is purely voluntary. So I can say, pass whatever rule you want, I'm not paying my dues, and I'm not following your rule, and I'm bringing in the dump truck for 20 feet of cement. Is that fairly accurate?
I don't want to build a bridge with you anymore.
Right. So I guess this comes down to is, we've got, these residents currently have the ability to fill in the lake up to their property line. There's nothing at a state or federal level that would stop it, short of MWRD creating a challenge out of nowhere for a small body of water, relatively speaking. It doesn't really create huge flood problems, I don't think. I'm not an engineer, but,
They have to apply to the city to get permission.
and I don't think we have any ground, since it was a resolution, not an ordinance. I view this as no different than the city wanting to put an ordinance on private property, just like we say your fence can't be over X feet tall, we can say you can't fill in the water, I think is what the residents are asking for us to try to put some sort of ordinance in. I think that's what it comes down to. There's nothing in place now, and they're looking for us to do something.
The application to put in the seawall was referred to engineering. They reviewed it against, I don't know if it was a structural code or some other regulation that engineering enforces, and ultimately returned it to the department as recommendation to approve. Perhaps it was reviewed for structural engineering purposes instead of for floodway purposes. But, you know, there are also common law nuisance claims as well available to the neighbors. And if someone attempts to take a dump truck full of dirt and fill in the lake, I'm sure a court would hear a common law nuisance claim to try and restrict that from happening.
Anything else? Jim, did you have anything further?
You know, I suppose now's the time for me to express our opinion for myself instead of from Director Brown. The memo asks the question, what general public benefit is served from placing special rules on Murphy Lake separate from any other private lake in the city? Is a restriction on fill going to serve only private benefit, or is it going to serve public health and safety? Is it going to benefit city stormwater regulations? Is it going to benefit, you know, is it going to save public works from man hours or flood control or any other public service the city provides? Is it going to reduce our costs from providing public services in any way? I think that's a salient question to ask when you're considering adopting rules for a private lake that doesn't participate, it's not part of the city's stormwater system.
Along those same lines, then, why would a city pass an ordinance about the height of a fence?
Because the height of a fence is part of the community environment, the aesthetic environment.
Good point.
Is there anyone in the audience who would like to,
Gail?
oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you, Marty.
That's okay, I was late to the game. If I could, so would it be fair to say the other difference between this and regulating fencing is that we regulate fencing everywhere in town? So it does, so as it relates to whether it be just safety or just attractiveness, it affects every corner of town because everyone in town has the ability, I think, to put up a fence according to our regulations.
Not in certain front, side yard.
Well, no, right, we restrict, but we
rules are
restrict,
generally-
that's my, I'm just trying to understand, you know, Charlie made the point that, why do we regulate, you know, how we, and we do other private you know, we do other things on private property too, but, so I'm trying to reconcile that in my head. Would that be a fair thing that this really is only impacting those residents that ring that lake? It doesn't affect anybody else in town?
We have not received direction to create a generally applicable rule for every private lake in the community. That wasn't what we understood was under consideration.
Right.
The example you gave, the fence regulations are generally applicable to all similarly situated properties.
Okay. All right, thanks, Gail.
So is part of the opinion of staff that this is some type of slippery slope towards, I think I read it in the first memo, I just got this other one, but that there's some slippery slope towards other associations, condo associations coming in and wanting us to enforce different special rules just for them? Wasn't that part of what was mentioned?
Yeah. on page 3 of the May 11th memo, the city should consider the potential precedents of agreeing to adopt and then enforce restrictions on private property. There are many homeowners associations that have enacted private restrictions on their homeowners, and these associations often struggle with the cost and the time necessary to enforce the private restrictions, no different than the concerns raised here. So the question is whether or not we want to adopt this homeowners association and adopt a special rule for this homeowners association where the city generally abstains from enforcing private restrictions that are recorded against property through a homeowners association covenant. For example, if there's a homeowners association covenant that says a fence can be no more than 3 feet tall, but the city says the fence can be 6 feet tall, we're gonna issue a permit for a fence over 3 feet tall because we don't enforce the private restriction. That would have to be enforced privately.
May I go to the audience now? Here, please come up and give us your name and address if you so wish, and you have...
Thank you. My name is Oscar Marquis. I live on Murphy Lake, 120 North D Road. I have a number of, I had prepared talking points to address the memo prepared by Attorney Tappendorf. But let me address a few of the other points that were made. First of all, the public benefit of Murphy Lake is that it's one of the few lakes, it's the only lake in Park Ridge other than Park Lake, which is controlled by a homeowners association. Murphy Lake, it has no control. It adds to the character of the town. It's like the country club. I'm not a member of the country club, but it's great to have a country club in Park Ridge. Everybody appreciates that, and I think that's true of having lakes in the city. When Mr. Brown prepared his memo for the last meeting, he had 2 reasons for staff to oppose the ordinance. One was it's illegal because of the Supreme Court decision. At the end of the meeting, he agreed that it's not illegal. In fact, the Supreme Court decision that he referred to said that control of private lakes or private waters should be left to local authority, like the Park Ridge City Council. The second reason was that it should be left to the HOA to enforce. We have no HOA. Murphy Lake Improvement Association is not an HOA. It's a private club. It's a voluntary association. We have meetings, we have gatherings, we take care of lake maintenance, and we collect dues. There was some talk about how much Murphy Lake Association controls in the filing of the resolution. Murphy Lake Association owns the center part of the lake. And our concern was never that the center part would be filled in. It couldn't because the association owns it. But we have a bay where the center part of the lake is, it looks to me like, and I'll pass around this map, it's maybe 6 feet. If every homeowner filled in, we'd have a swamp. If you look at the map, and I'm sorry I only brought one. I brought 10 copies of my talking points. We'd have a swamp if every homeowner took advantage of their property in the water to expand the size of the lot. In '98, that's what happened. Someone, the estate of a former owner wanted to fill in their part in the water, which happened to be one of the deepest parts in the lake, where the fish habitate during the winter. And as we discussed at the last meeting, we stopped that. But let me go to, Murphy Lake is a fragile lake, and filling in one section that is deep can have a serious effect on the ecology of the lake. We're not an HOA. When the properties, can I go on for more than 5 minutes, by the way? Try. When the property was created.
3 minutes supposed to be.
5?
We'll give you another minute.
They gave me more last time.
All right, go ahead.
When the property was created, when the development was created, there was no declaration under the Condominium Act. There were it was all voluntary. No one could be made to pay dues. No one can be prohibited from filling their part of the lake. The HOA has no authority at all. And as the city attorney mentioned, there's no restrictive covenant. We filed the resolution against the owned property because we had no authority to file it against privately owned property. In fact, we can't file a restrictive covenant against any property owner without consent. In 1956, the association, shortly after it was formed, filed with the Cook County Recorder of Deeds the section of the bylaws dealing with dues. That was also filed against the association-owned part of the property because it can't be enforced. In fact, the association, in fact, litigated against a number of owners for not paying their dues. The suit was dismissed because we have no enforcement right. The HOA, there's no HOA. The association, the Murphy Lake Improvement Association or Club bylaws are wishes. We have lake rules. You know, you can't have a motorboat on the lake. That's a wish. We have dues. We have no lake fill as a resolution. Those are wishes. They can't be enforced. So Ms. Tappendorf, or Attorney Tappendorf's memorandum suggests three alternatives. Pass an ordinance, enforce it by the association, enforce no lake fill, have the association enforce that, and individuals can bring causes of action. We have no rights to enforce. Those two options don't work. They're not viable. So the only viable option is some sort of city council action, whatever form it takes. Here's what happened in 1998, and I have, if I can quote from the minutes, and why it became a resolution rather than an ordinance at that time. Quote, and you can read along with me if you have it. The city land grade ordinance controls filling, and the Director of Public Works has previously stated that he would not approve filling of the lake. Attorney Keller concluded that there is no need to design a new tool for this, as an adequate tool exists, namely the land grade ordinance. But if the City Council wishes, he could provide an alternative. Chairman Strout suggested Council adopt a policy prohibiting fill. The action resulting from that meeting was City Attorney Keller to draft a resolution for City Council's approval to direct Public Works Director to refuse to issue a permit for altering any land grade or any construction in Murphy Lake or Park Lake. Those are from the minutes of the June 2, 1998 meeting. A resolution was adopted as a result, and the resolution prohibits lake fill, and it directs the Director of Public Works to prohibit lake fill on Murphy and Park Lake. It wasn't needed on Park Lake, but on Murphy Lake, because under the code dealing with change of grade. So Attorney Tappendorf's memo lists a number of issues to consider.
We're going to have to kind of.
All right, let me get to the important point, the most important point.
Okay.
This is not a new precedent. This has been in effect for almost 20 years. There has been no adverse consequence. It's been enforced at least 3 times where landfill was not permitted. There has been no legal liability. There has been no added burden on the city. We're not asking for anything new. We're saying that the policy of the city should not change because the legal opinion changes or the staff changes. We're like a group of neighbors asking that the city enact an ordinance regarding setback regulations and to prevent somebody from building up to the sidewalk. Okay, you're getting impatient with me? Let me suggest this. We should consider, what the city council should consider is the precedence of not acting. The policy has been in effect for almost 20 years. It was agreed to by everyone, the city council, the staff, the attorney, that the way to protect Murphy Lake is through a resolution. That resolution is still in effect. It was never withdrawn. It was based on an ordinance that still exists.
Sir, we really do have to.
Okay, let me just finish. This resolution now is no longer enforceable without notice to anyone, without a public hearing, without city council is not informed that their resolution is not going to be enforced. Taxpayers of Park Ridge need certainty, predictability, and I think we need to continue to enforce the policy that's been around for 20 years, regardless of how you do it. New resolution ordinance, a sub-paragraph to the grading ordinance, new zoning regulations, whatever works.
So we'd like to give somebody else a chance to speak if they'd like.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I apologize for running over.
Okay.
But it was a long memo to address.
I'm a mean taskmaster, I know. Yes. Someone else in the audience like to speak? Please come on up and identify yourself.
Judy Barkley, 524 Cortland. Just a possible suggestion that might work, since we have at least 2 lakes that we're completely aware of in this town, why don't we create a lake district? Not unlike our open space district in zoning or our R1 or R2. This way, you have a district that is governed by ordinance and can be controlled the same way. Because I was there the last few times this came up, and they wanted to infill to increase the size of their lot so they could increase the size of the FAR and build a bigger house. Now, I don't know the circumstances that well behind this. I didn't, attend the last meeting, but I think that possibly a lake district. I mean, those are 2 special places we have in this town. And just because they aren't public, I know they don't fall under the Army Corps. We went through that the last time, but it seems to me EPA has things to say about even private lakes. I'm looking at the city attorney because I think that might be an avenue also to look at. The EPA regulations, because they control puddles on farmland. Puddles, not lakes, puddles. So it may be something that can be handled that way, but I think truthfully, to save our 2 little special places in town, and possibly even the pond down at Main South, create a lake district, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to, speak? Please give us your name and address, if you'd like.
Christina Doherty.
Could you put the microphone a little closer? Thank you. I can't hear you always.
My name is Christina Doherty. I live on 1223 South Vine. I have a complaint for 400 Talcott Avenue. I have a complaint.
Ma'am, we already finished the discussion on the 400.
But I don't hear it. You finish it. I'm sorry. And I have just a complaint. I just got the complaint by the make it a ditch for that foundation is a lot of water, and they throw the water to sewer. I have the backup on my basement. I don't think that's fair.
Ma'am, that's for citizens wishing to speak on a non-agenda item.
Yeah,
That was at the
I'm
beginning of
sorry.
the meeting. We're on the topic of Murphy Lake protections right now.
Oh, you
That's
have-
not
Yeah,
part
take
of,
your
that's, what you're talking about is not part of Murphy Lake protections.
So that's it. We leave what we got.
Had the
Okay.
opportunity to
Thank
speak
you.
earlier.
Yes, you did.
Thank you.
Thank
As well as come back on a subsequent.
We can, but right now, we're on the Murphy Lake discussion. Yes, sir?
I'm Neil Slab, 300 North D Road. I'm the president of the Improvement Association. Couple brief comments. We had an internal meeting, and listening to you guys and some of the discussion, we respect that you feel you don't want to be involved in a homeowners association, which we're not. And we sort of agree in that we want to work with you guys to come up with something where we're not, it's come up 3 times in 20 years. Not very often somebody's going to try to do this, but as it's kind of been outlined, we have 0 recourse. And we're willing to work with you guys, like as she even just said, and as Oscar closed with, if there's any other options, so we can feel good that the lake will be preserved. So perhaps there's something that we can do that works for everybody, where you guys' concerns are protected and our concerns are protected. Because I think that there really could be. Because I think from hearing the discussion back and forth and some of the really smart questions people are asking, we all want the same thing. We all want the lake preserved without, you know, nitpicking in an, you know, an onerous process for anybody. So maybe we can continue the discussion and come up with something else.
Thank you, good points. Anyone else care to, please step up, give us your name and.
Hi, I'm Chantel Bill, and I'm here on behalf of Donald Schumacher, who resides at 2407 Cherry Street. He cannot be here because he's out of town for some medical treatment. We just want to relay that we support how the city of Park Ridge is leaning, which is to not enact an ordinance. In full disclosure, I'm Mr. Schumacher's private attorney, and he is more than happy to work with those folks who live at the lake, work with the city in any way. There's a long history with this lake, which I obviously can't relay, and I wish he could be here to relay, but I know he's spoken with Mr. Brown at length on that history. But with that said, I don't want to reiterate what the city attorney has said, but it is our viewpoint that this is private property. And for the city to come in and regulate that, it does need to be for a health and safety issue. This is not a large group of Park Ridge residents who have access to this lake. In fact, it's a very small number. It is a private lake without access to the general community. And so to come in and regulate, there needs to be that health and safety issue. It just doesn't exist here. So we really do want to work with the fellow homeowners and with the city, but an ordinance just is not the way to move forward and regulate homeowners and their private property. And there is some case law with the Supreme Court of Illinois that's not specifically on point, but does talk about lakes, regulation of the top waters of the lake, and, you know, respectfully to Mr. McKee, if everybody did fill in, then that private group would have a right of action. Right? There would be no lake left in the middle. That's a right of action they would have. Neighbors have nuisance actions. There is private recourse for neighbors and that association if it gets to that point. So we respectfully request that the city does not enact an ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
John Sandrick, Fifth Ward. Mr. Marquis mentioned grade changes. I would just say that the city has done a miserable job of enforcing grade changes. Ask anybody who lives near new construction. So don't rely on that as being the answer to the problem.
This gentleman's been patient, and I'm sorry I missed you before. I apologize.
Hello, I'm Damon Sather, 217 Murphy Lake Lane. It is my wife and my seawall that started all this time around.
You're the troublemaker.
Sorry, we meant no disrespect. We honestly had no idea of a resolution or even guidelines within the association, and that was kind of the real issue. If we would have known about these issues ahead of time, or that there were concerns within the Lake Association and on the shoreline maintenance issue, we would have been more than happy to comply and to listen to whatever the association had to say. You know, all we knew is that our land was eroding rapidly. I could look at aerial photographs from years before going like, and even just in the year in which we owned it before we started to build, it was really eroding quickly. And we felt we needed to take action, and we could see where the old shoreline, at least where it was closely where it used to be, and we could also see massive boulders in the way, so we had to be a little creative in where we put our wall. And we had no idea that this was an issue at all until there was a stop work order against our property, and that was the cost, expense, and the delay and the aggravation was very frustrating. So I will say, as a new member of the association and in Park Ridge, we'd really like to stress that maybe it should be kept within the association to have guidelines and then to work with us, especially when it comes to seawalls, because I think from what I can see around the lake, most people should have a seawall, and if that means going into the lake a little ways to get some of their past property back and to keep erosion and, you know, goose droppings and everything else from going into the lake, which is certainly not good for the ecology and the cleanliness of the lake, I think that should be tantamount. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Come back to the alderman here.
Yeah, more.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed you too. I'm not quick enough here. Take your time. I apologize.
I would just like to say that
Please.
I'm actually glad that,
Your name?
Your name, please?
I'm sorry, I'm Catherine Marquis.
Oh, okay.
I live at 120 North D.
Okay.
I'm the wife of Oscar Marquis, and I actually was involved with the issue and the resolution and developing that with a lot of input from many helpful people with expertise back in 1997, 98. So here I am again. I didn't think I'd have to be here before the City Council talking about this same issue 20 years later in my old age, but here I am. But I would like to just quickly say that I, in a way, the fact that we had this experience with the Sathers, and it's unfortunate that they kind of got caught up in something here with us, but it was the only way that we actually found out that the resolution that we had, that the City Council passed 20 years ago, was no longer in effect. So this gives us an opportunity to look at what would be priority for our community, for Murphy Lake and the citizens around it. Really, I think also in regard to Mr. Schumacher's attorney and her comment that when the lake is filled in, then people can complain because then there'll be a big problem. I think it's too late at that point for anyone to do anything about it, as there might be properties filling in but one by one, if that's the kind of thing that we're envisioning here that could possibly happen. And again, I think that the map there is very explicit in terms of quite a bit of property that would be filled in, that would really change the character of the lake in every way. Wildlife and the residential use and the property value, which is connected to the taxation value. So all of that would actually harm the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Last call out there. Anyone else I may have missed? We'll go back to the alderman.
So I know it's comments, but I had a question based on some of the comments from the audience. So I'll bite as far as the lake districts. What would that look like? And this is to the city attorney. Would that be a way to bypass the private versus public concerns if we were to do that?
I haven't had a chance to speak with Ms. Barclay about her idea, but I imagine she was suggesting creating a new zoning district altogether.
Okay.
That would create some maximum home size or maximum effective lot size for FAR purposes, so that there'd be no incentive to build out into the lake to artificially increase your FAR. You have the power to zone property, but certainly you can't rezone it without having a public hearing and having a public process with the homeowners who you'd affect. But I think that's, if I can speculate on what her intent was, it was along those lines.
Thank you.
I mean, there's a few solutions. We could pass an ordinance that prohibits the grading change around these two specific lakes. If we do that, there's a chance of getting sued. It'd be great if the association would put together a joint defense fund or something for that to protect the city. We could eminent domain the whole lake.
I'm sorry?
We could eminent domain the whole lake. That won't cost much to maintain. Maybe you could chip in on maintaining the lake, as well as, again, the joint defense fund. Or you could go around and try to get all the residents to mandatorily join a homeowner association. And I don't think, that's gonna go very well either. So I think the intention for the majority of people here is to protect this, what I would call a natural resource and a benefit to the city, but no matter how we dice and slice it, it sounds like at least one party, I'm assuming with some means, would be opposed to it and, put the city in some sort of potential legal liability.
Jim, you had your hand up.
I did. I just had another comment, if I may, on the zoning question. A zoning technique to consider would be what's called an overlay district. That's where the underlying zoning remains. This is zoned R1. I don't know off the top of my head if Park Lake is zoned R1, I believe it is. But the overlay district then applies to a very specific geographic area and for a very specific purpose. So it would not be a new zoning district. It would, all the underlying zoning restrictions and regulations for R1 would still apply, but the overlay district would then attach other restrictions or regulations for a specific geographic area. And that would be something to consider. I didn't know.
Alderman Mazuka.
Thank you. You're looking for consensus on a way to move forward here. I think my view is that this is a, I know before everybody says it's not an HOA, it's a lot like one, it seems. And this is a dispute between an individual property owner and their HOA, and jumping in the middle of that as someone who lives in a condominium and has served on a condominium board and seen this happen more than a few times. I don't think the city should be trying to jump in the middle of this, and I think that if there are folks here on private property that want to collectively place restrictions on how that private property is used, that is their choice. If they collectively choose to not place restrictions, that is their choice. The argument that this is a unique space that adds to the character of this community, it is private property. The community at large does not get to enjoy Park Lake or Murphy Lake. This is for their private, the folks who live around it, it's their private use. They get to enjoy the benefits, and having the city take on the responsibility of enforcement shifts the costs from private to public, and there is no public benefit that I can see for doing that. So my view is stay out of this, and I would support any action that keeps the city on the sidelines of this. Thank you.
So I'm gonna agree with Alderman Mazuka. I wish we would have gotten clearer, at least in my mind, options, because we heard obviously two sides between our attorney and the residents, arguing on whether there are options that don't involve the city. I wish we had, better, I still don't feel 100% on that, but I'm gonna have to err towards the side of our council's advice, the city council's advice, and much like Alderman Mazuka said, I'm very nervous about the slippery slope of this and injecting the city into something that is a private matter. However small or inconvenient the solutions might be for the private side, they're still there, and they're inconvenient and costly for any other association around town. So I don't think the city should be taking that burden on. So my consensus would be for us to stay out of this.
Yes, John.
I think this is, I agree with some of the comments that were just made, but I feel like it is a unique situation. It's not like a condominium or townhome or any other type of HOA, where we'd have a slippery slope of other organizations coming to request our services or our, pass costs onto us to enforce things. This is very unique. And it's also unique in the sense that the city actually did take some action. It wasn't the proper action, but they've tried to do this before. And now it's falling on us to try to fix it, is what we were being asked to do. And it seems like some would rather just walk away from it and not have any of the responsibility at all. I was shocked to learn that it isn't an enforceable excuse me, ordinance based on our legal interpretations. Man. But I still feel, I shared my opinion back in April was that I think there is something, thank you. If there is something we can do as your overlay district, I'd like to see it explored. I think the fact that we're missing two of our aldermen this evening doesn't help with that. You know, and I wouldn't mind seeing staff put a little bit more time into creating what they think would be the best solution if we were to take action on this. In terms of avoiding slippery slopes and setting precedents for other, you know, variables and hypothetical situations. And I'd like to see what we have here is kind of three options, but they don't really give a lot of detail on what those options would look like. I think that if the city was gonna do something, here's what, and I understand you don't think we should, but if we were, here's what we think the best option would be helpful for me to make a decision. I don't necessarily, that would then tell me, yes, this is something we should move forward with, or no, it's not, and right now I don't really have that yet.
Mayor Maloney.
Sir, you good?
Oh, you done, John? I'm
Yep,
sorry, I
sorry, yeah.
apologize.
Okay. Jim, have we surveyed the residents of the lake?
We haven't conducted any type of survey. I will say, since April, I've had conversations with a couple of the residents. I visited Mr. Schumacher, for example, and I am aware that there are people who are against regulation. And I also understand there was if you want to call it an HOA meeting, association meeting, very recently, and there was a suggestion of some type of compromise or relaxation of what we would enforce. I haven't heard anything, and I got conflicting reports on what transpired at the meeting.
Do you think it would make sense?
But I have had contact. I haven't taken a poll, but I am aware there are other people who are opposed to any type of regulation.
I guess I'm just, a comment I'll make is, I wonder if we're kind of putting the cart before the horse. With all due respect to the people in the room here, we don't know if they represent a minority or a majority of the people who live around that lake. I suspect they probably, the sentiments that have expressed here are a majority, but we don't know that. And we won't frankly change parking on a street without a majority, let alone do something like this, which frankly, we have two attorneys, Public Works and CP&D directors, who have said they don't recommend it. So I guess if we want to, you know, one option would be to pause and just make sure that we are actually following the majority of people that live around that lake, not just the majority of people who attend a meeting. Respectfully, I'm glad you're here and I'm glad you're sharing that with us, but I would hate to we've already had frankly 2 meetings on it, and we really don't know the answer to that question. So, again, for what that's worth.
Maybe I'll make just one brief comment. We have another lake that doesn't seem to have these issues because they do have an HOA. For whatever reason, you don't, Murphy Lake doesn't have an HOA. That might have solved a lot of these issues. And to me, it kind of just sounds, no offense, but I'm on a condo board. I own a condo. It sounds a dispute between neighbors. My inclination would be to step back and let these neighbors sort it out. I don't think that the gentleman who wanted to build up I don't even know your name, so I apologize. I don't think his intent was to, fill in the lake or to do anything detracting to the value of anyone's property or his own. I think he was probably just concerned about, fixing the edge of his property. I don't really, as a person and as a member of this council, don't want to get into disagreements between neighbors. I don't think that everybody, I don't think there's any ill, this gentleman doesn't have any ill desires, and I know that the other people want to preserve the lake too. So I see both sides, but I'm disinclined to go any further with this, but again, it's up to the council, and what our attorney says. What do you think?
I can only count 3 votes so far that are clearly
Yeah.
against it. I don't know if that's.
So I think, if we got to 4, I think we would have clear direction, but there are 2 aldermen missing tonight. Charlie,
Yes.
where are you at on this?
If they had a homeowners association, I would agree, let them take care of it. But just like 2 neighbors or 6 neighbors living on a block who don't have a homeowner association, their only recourse is to go to the city as the governing body. I am mindful, again, these are probably residents with some deep pockets, and I would like to get consensus from them on something that would, not create, we're trying to solve a little problem that doesn't happen very often, but I don't want to spend a few $100,000 litigating over it. And I suspect these are people with, private property rights that are gonna dig their heels in. It's a very realistic thing. So I would prefer that these residents perhaps work with their alderman, and see if there is a resolution they want to bring forward on behalf of the residents in their ward, and we could, whatever due process there is with surveying the residents, posting some zoning ordinance change, whatever that thing is, you put the horses out and people come to a meeting and we have testimony, something that's a little bit more transparent than what we've done these last 2 meetings, but I'd like to put this to bed, and, go through that to figure out one way or another what the residents say and take it to a vote.
So where does that leave us, gentlemen? Yes, Mr. Masuka.
Sounds to me like it's three to put this to bed tonight. One in the middle and one to have staff continue to move forward in the original direction we gave. So that's the way I read it.
Yeah. So we move forward from here to see what staff is going to do, or just?
I think there's not consensus to continue on with this.
All right.
But as chair, I think you have the discretion to bring this back up at a later point if you get feedback from some other aldermen.
Leave it at that. Well, I'm sorry, Mayor, I didn't see you
No,
again.
that's okay.
I'm not used to seeing you there.
I'm slow.
You're
It's
supposed to sit
been
here.
a long day. I might offer, and again, I hate to, keep bringing people out, but the fact of the matter is, right now, if we go by the consensus in the room, it's not gonna move forward. But that being said, we are missing 2 aldermen. One of them is the alderman for this ward, right?
Yes, sir.
So again, I certainly, his input would be important in this process. And I guess I wonder if we could, and I might say, just to maybe push this into the fall, because during summer, and again, that is another couple of months out, but the fact of the matter is, during summer, people take their eye off stuff. And, we've been accused here at City Council, when we try and push things through, we try and do things in the summer, of pushing them through. But and I'll be honest, I would not support any of this until we get feedback from everybody around that lake, thumbs up or thumbs down, whether they support. And of course, we'd have to go to them. Jim, I realize I'm asking if you've surveyed them, and I'm sure your question is, survey them on what? Right, so I get it. But I do think that's important to make sure we're figuring this out. And then I guess there were some questions raised tonight. Ms. Barkley talked about Lake District. Jim, you yourself threw out that maybe there's an overlay district. If there is a way to do this where we wouldn't legally get ourselves in hot water, because I do have that concern that we would be doing something that would result in a lawsuit that benefits a small number of residents, but the large number of residents in town would all have to be on the hook to defend that. So I guess an option might be to fully vet Ms. Barkley's suggestion, and again, Adam, you and Julie would have to give us some guidelines. If there is a way to do a lake district or an overlay district, and if we did something like that, would it even encumber the people who live there today who bought their homes when it was zoned something different? Or would they be able to, and I don't know this, that's just a concern I would have, can we switch zoning on people, if they live in an area?
There's a process for doing that, yeah.
Okay. It might be an option. Again, I think the concerns I hear are from up here, that we might be putting the city in a bad position legally. And if there was a way around that, there's a way to do this legally, and that would be defensible, then I think it might be a little bit more palatable. And certainly, it'd be worth getting Alderman Schubert and Alderman Joyce's opinions on this as well. Just an idea.
I would agree with that.
At the end of the day.
And I would,
Okay, go ahead,
sorry.
John. I'm sorry, John, I stepped on you.
I agree that you know, another discussion with the other aldermen here would be helpful. I also think that having a more detailed proposal of what action we would take, not just, hey, you guys could take action, which is basically all I'm getting out of the memo right now, but a more detailed, here's the way we think if you were gonna take action, you should do it. So we would know exactly what we're exposed to, exactly what the process would be. Just because we decided that's what we'd wanna do, they'd still have to go to, I believe it's P and Z you were saying? There would be a public hearing there with plenty of time for other input, and we'd know more of what exactly we were getting into. Where right now, we really don't have that put in front of us, and I think part of it is staff was kind of, you know, they've given their recommendation that we shouldn't do anything, but I'd like to see how this would play out if the direction from council was to take some type of action.
My inclination is to say that three of the aldermen here would just say, put this thing to bed right now. To me, it still seems like an issue between neighbors, and I know that this gentleman, who, again, I don't know your name, and I apologize. I know it's costing him money, and it's costing the city money to keep discussing. I'm not sure the only thing be gained to change this for, 12 people who live in a little area. There seems to be interest in going farther with it, but my inclination would be to put it to bed. Mr. Mazuka.
I would support that, but to Mayor Maloney's point, not without the input of the remaining two aldermen who couldn't be here tonight.
Okay,
so I would say that if you get an indication from them that they also favor putting this to bed, that we just wouldn't bring it back for another agenda. But if you do get an indication that they want to press forward a little more diligently, then we could bring it back.
That sound okay to everyone?
Yep.
Sure.
All right, thank you. And I have a feeling there's as many people who don't want us to go forward with this as do want us to go forward with this, so.
Should they reach out and communicate with the city if they're opposed to it or in favor of it?
Well, it wouldn't hurt. I mean, that's doable, but.
You're talking about, Adam, you're talking about the residents?
Yes.
Yeah.
We certainly could invite them to do that, but then we are, it's not really a scientific.
Unofficial.
Because they're self-selecting then, so the people that are passionate, I imagine everyone in this room would reach out to us, or they already have in essence. I'm concerned about the people that aren't here and maybe aren't as passionate about it. But, and again, I don't know the answer to that. Maybe that's something to talk with the city manager about offline and with Jim. Find a way to effectively survey the residents, like we do if we're we're permitting a street in a block, we will survey the residents. We have a process for that. I know this little gray area, we don't necessarily do this all the time, but I would be afraid if we base decisions on who contacted us, we might not be getting everybody. That's all.
So I still don't know where that leaves us. Are we coming back? I mean, seriously.
There's no action on the floor.
Okay.
My understanding, based on what the council's comments are, they're looking to get feedback from Alderman Schubert and Alderman Joyce to see if they can tip the scales stronger in one direction.
All right.
Right now it's in an impasse because there isn't really a strong majority in either direction.
Yep.
So that's kind of it.
People in the back shaking their heads saying, put this thing to bed tonight, as there are saying don't, so. Well, we're going to talk to aldermen. Okay, all right. We're going to talk to the aldermen that are not here. We'll discuss this right now. We'll have no action on it. How's that? Right? Make sense?
Yeah.
Go for it. All right. Next item. Oh, another little thing. We're going to discuss the use of official email accounts. And that, Jim, I guess, right?
I can start. Staff recently created email accounts for elected officials. The question tonight is initial discussion on some policy concerns. Do we want to have a policy that regarding city matters, the elected officials use exclusively that email account? Do we want to make it a personal choice, whether you use your own personal email or city electronic account, things of that nature. So it's just the, kind of the initial takeoff of this.
Yes, Mayor Maloney.
I would like one.
Yeah.
And my opinion, what's that?
You can all have one. The question is, to what degree do you want to create a policy that would allow you to use it whenever you want to, or whether you want to mandate people use it for city business? You know, so staff has already created the technology for you to do it.
Right, I would support providing city-provided email addresses for elected officials to conduct city business. And again, I don't know if we can make it mandatory, but I think certainly a policy or a guideline that encourages residents to reach, when they want to, we could do, obviously, we can publish and publicize those email addresses, and we can encourage, as a matter of policy or a guideline, that elected officials conduct any city business through that email. That's something I would support. Again, I don't know if that's punishable, and that's just me. I know almost everybody else around here, maybe not Charlie, has a designated, maybe you do too, aldermanic email address. It's a Google provided address, a Google address or a Yahoo address. Yeah, but again, I just think it's a matter of policy. I think it's a good policy to put in place and encourage as much as we can.
I keep wanting to make you mayor. Alderman Meladosian.
I don't want to enforce it as a policy just because such a small group of the city. It's only 7 residents. We can't enforce something for a much larger body of residents with the lake, so.
Funny.
That was humor.
I got you.
Regardless, I guess it's important, though, I mean, this is really just optically, kind of nonsense to me that we have these city addresses. I'm fine with using the city addresses. It doesn't really change anything technically. Whether that email goes to your @parkridge.us address or it goes to your @meladosian.com or your @gmail.com, it's still FOIA-able.
I don't agree.
You don't agree?
No.
And even with these email addresses, no two-way communications of a majority of aldermen should take place using these addresses. Or do you not agree with that?
I do agree with that.
Okay. So
Insofar as the use of electronic communications is concerned, you've identified FOIA issues and Open Meetings Act issues. Certainly, no private or public email account should ever be used in a way that creates a meeting under the Open Meetings Act. And it's well recognized that you can create a meeting using contemporaneous electronic communication, including email. So regardless of whether you're using Gmail or Meladosian or Google or whatever, that could create an Open Meetings Act issue, and I think everyone here is very sensitive to that and avoids that. Insofar as FOIA is concerned, whether or not the email, we'll start with the premise that the email deals with city business as a threshold issue.
Let me rephrase FOIA-able with discoverable.
No. Let's start with the premise that the communication you're having deals with city business at all. So that's a threshold given. If you're emailing a resident in your ward about a local issue from meladosian.com and it's one-on-one, it is not FOIA-able. You are not a public body and it is not subject to discovery or FOIA. If you were to email them from cmeladosian@parkridge.us, it would be on a city server, it would be dealing with city business, it would be subject to FOIA. It would further be extraordinarily easy for the city to identify it and capture it for records retention and for FOIA purposes. The mayor said that there's no punishment for not following the policy or preference. Enough of you around the horseshoe have been here long enough to have suffered the punishment of having to address a FOIA request. And I don't mean that in a anti-sunshine way. But
what we're calling him now? Never mind.
But there's a significant personal burden to search your email accounts if you've commingled your personal email from your business email. So whether or not that burden
So,
You know, it's a personal decision.
so as somebody who's had my email FOIA'd, I'd be able to simply, if a FOIA came in requesting my records of communication on whatever kind of topic, if it's all through the city, I don't really have to do anything.
Right.
Our FOIA officer can just pull up all the data, scrub through whatever needs to be done, and it goes out as a response.
Yeah, we would probably have you fill out some sort of statement saying, all email I receive on my personal account is forwarded to the city account, so that captures all relevant correspondence, and that would cover it.
Okay. Or it was all just sent to.
Or it was just sent to the city account.
I only use my city account for city business.
Mark, you had your hand up and.
Yeah, and I think that, for me, this is about cost savings and trying to make sure that when we do get a FOIA, that we have a very straightforward, clear, and systematic way of dealing with it. I have received more than one FOIA request that has ruined otherwise pleasant evenings and involving trying to search through records. I think I'm in a little over 5 years. I think I've got something well north of 20,000 tos and froms that I have to look through. So, you know, I look at it as, you know, for the newer aldermen, you may not recognize how much time one of these things will eat up now, but give it a few years and have, you know, some politically motivated person
Who shall remain
FOIA like
nameless.
20,000 emails on you.
That'll never
It will not make your day. So I'm in favor of the city using a city address and having it on a city server.
Mayor Maloney.
Adam, I just want to clarify something you said. So if I'm emailing a resident from Marty Maloney at Gmail, even if it's about city business, just one-on-one with this resident about a stop sign they want on a given block, and the city gets a FOIA request that says, we want all email from Mayor Maloney to either naming the resident or on the topic, are you saying that that email correspondence is not FOIAable?
That's correct.
Okay.
There was an appellate court decision involving the city of Champaign, where the appellate court laid out 3 circumstances where electronic communications on personal accounts or personal devices are subject to FOIA. If it involves a majority of a quorum of the elected officials, if it occurs during a meeting, when you're acting as the public body collectively, or if it is sent to or from a city server.
So
So it's in the custody or control of the city.
so correspondence between Joe and myself is FOIAable,
Yes,
even through me, even,
because you're sending it to a Park Ridge address.
so, okay, so then it becomes FOIAable. Because we just had one, we had a FOIA for red light cameras that we all had to do some searching for. And that was only, it was asking for to and from, I think, members of the General Assembly and that, so, but because you're saying I didn't need to respond to that? Because it was through my Gmail account?
We had to identify, we had to see the emails to identify whether they can be excluded. So we have to identify the emails that are potentially on that topic, and then scrub those broad topic emails to see if they meet the other criteria from the appellate case.
But one could argue then that it's actually the city, if the city were to make this move to pushing all the elected officials to a city-provided email address, that we're actually becoming more transparent, because then the communications between myself and my neighbor about that stop sign that they want on their block is FOIAble, because it's Marty Maloney at parkridge.us, so now it does become FOIAble.
It is more accessible.
So we're actually, to make this move, it's easier for us because IT and city staff can search for the emails, and we don't have the sleepless nights that Mark described, that frankly I've had too, searching through thousands of emails. But we also are more transparent because there's more emails that are in essence part of the public body, right?
think that's true.
Okay, thank you.
But what we've done is shifted more, the population of FOIAble, reviewable documents is gonna expand.
Yeah.
And we've shifted the burden from the low-cost alderman labor to paid city staff, attorneys reviewing privilege and reviewing documents. I think I don't know if the cost saving, I appreciate the transparency, but I don't think there's really cost savings. And I go back to the discoverable question. I understand anything that touches the city servers, part of the FOIA request, and you guys have access to that, you own that content, et cetera, et cetera. But let's say the mayor gets named as part of a suit. Not only is his city email going to be subject to discovery, would you agree that his personal email is part of discovery and would have to go through a review?
I'm going to give you an answer. I'm going to sound like an attorney and give you an attorney answer.
It depends.
It does depend, because we don't know what the nature of the case is. Is the mayor being sued for personal animus against an applicant and it's a civil rights violation? Then the judge might find that it's relevant to find out what communications he has that are consistent with that motivation. If it's a case where it's a question of what the legislative body decided collectively, any individual alderman's communications is irrelevant, because you only act as a collective body, which is why the appellate court decided that individual emails are not emails of the public body, they're individual emails.
And I guess one other question, Joe, can we change it then where when we get the emails off the website, it's more of a form-based email? And you can't just so many times I've just hit reply and it bounces back. You have to copy and paste the reply address into the to address and all that. If we're gonna do this, let's just publish those mail to links. I don't really care about, I'm assuming the city's got some spam protection that's gonna filter out people crawling the city's website and.
Yeah, I would think we could, if we're gonna go to the city-issued email addresses, we could just publish those, and,
I know.
yeah, and I don't know about, as far as the responding and the no reply and all that, I'd have to touch base with IT, but I would think it'd be possible.
Forms and just, they click a link and it sends them in. And I'm assuming all the modern day features of being able to set this up on our mobile devices so it can appear as another account
Yeah.
is there, as well as some sort of web-based access
Yeah,
is
yeah.
available
IT has
without being
a-
on the city's network or VPNing in or anything like that.
Yeah, we've got a kind of a little tutorial to distribute. We wanted to have this discussion first, but yeah, you'll have full access to it on handheld or whatever.
And just out of curiosity, are we paying for extra seats of email? I'm sure it's nominal, $50, $100.
I don't
Is this
think-
costing the city money?
I think it was under the same program we had. I don't think we had to go out and buy an additional.
You know, an extra 8 licenses is
Yeah,
not gonna break
no.
the bank, but, okay.
Alderman Mazuka had his hand up.
Yeah, I mean, to Alderman Meldosian's point, yes, alderman time is extraordinarily low cost and certainly per hour. But also the city IT department probably has some tools to search through email that work, and certainly law firms probably have tools to search through email that are a lot spiffier than searching for one word in Google or in Gmail. So I think that, you know, yes, there will be some added staff cost, but I think they'll do the job. They have the tools to do the job fairly well and fairly efficiently. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay.
Almost in favor of going the city-issued email account.
Okay. All those in favor of going to the city email?
No,
Oh,
anyone-
I'm sorry. Anybody from the audience haven't?
Not a vote, anyway.
I keep forgetting. Oh, okay. Sorry, I almost forgot.
Hello, Carol Salas, 8 Berry. So we submitted, me, John English, and Jennifer Leduc. We're three Parkridge citizens who also just happen to be attorneys. So on June 9th, we emailed a proposed revision to Council Policy Statement number 42. I have hard copies. I'm assuming everybody has the electronic version. If not, let me know if you want a hard copy. Does everybody have the electronic version?
I don't know.
So,
So-
that wasn't on the agenda tonight because whether or not the city council wanted to collectively adopt the parkridge.us email address as a policy and preference was a threshold question before we reviewed the secondary policies.
Right. So we feel that this discussion, it is a step in the right direction, and whether you decide to use these city-issued email accounts or not, our revisions to CPS 42 would still be relevant. It just involves the retention of records, and just, I mean, the point is to make everyone's lives easier, because everyone saw with that FOIA request what a nightmare it would have been to collect all of these emails. So, I mean, it is a step in the right direction. The other issue is that it wouldn't solve the problem of, let's say, someone submitting a FOIA request tomorrow and it covering, emails in the possession of a former alderman. And what if that alderman moves, to, out of the country or something? So we should also have a mechanism whereby, I mean, as an attorney, there are like forensic companies who will just, it really takes only 20 minutes for them to, you give them your Gmail password, you're on the phone with them, and it takes them that quick just to get all of your Gmails. You can put it in a separate folder if you don't want all of your, personal emails collected, but, I mean, so that is an issue with, former aldermen and, things like that going backwards in time. And then it is a good thing to have these city-issued email accounts for the new aldermen too, so that they don't have these problems. So as to the FOIA issues, I don't have as much information as Jennifer Leduc, who used to be the FOIA officer for the Illinois Gaming Board. So she helped us with this, and she wasn't able to make it here tonight.
So the issues you raise, I think, are relevant, but
Right.
we didn't know they needed to be addressed at all until
that's
the city council decided whether or not they wanted to use the email addresses. So we haven't even gotten to that part yet, until
Okay.
they decided they wanted to adopt the emails.
Right, I mean, I saw that was on the proposed list with the date TBD. So, I mean, I just wanted to mention that since it is relevant to this, FOIA, records retention, records destruction issue. That's all.
Back to the question at hand. Yes, Alderman Mazuka.
So if you're looking for consensus,
Yes.
I'm in favor of city emails. Let's do it.
Anyone?
Second.
Okay.
There's no vote. There's no
There's a
vote on
motion.
motion.
Not voting, not voting.
I'll give it a thumbs up.
Okay.
Same here.
You? Seems to be the,
You're still gonna get FOIA requests, though, dating the stuff back to 2012, and
That's-
you have to dig through both.
all right.
But it will change
Well,
eventually.
Then we should, I think we've got consensus to continue with that. I think it's a good idea. I think it'll make all our lives easier, or not, I don't know, but it'll clean it out anyway. I mean, it'll clean it up. All right, good. We're not done yet. Upcoming P&R items. Okay, well, there's this laundry list of items. Jim?
Right, prepared monthly, of the list is change the city clerk from an elected to an appointed position. We could do that anytime. I mean, we
Yes.
have a couple of years before the next election. There's nothing else, as I review this list, that really, I think has any terrible sense of urgency. If I'm mistaken, please correct me. But if there's anything you would like to see moved up or elevated, then please advise.
Is there anything anyone sees that, oh, Alderman Moran.
I thought it was maybe the last cow or the one before that for procedures and regulations where or maybe it was just an after a meeting kind of comment. But we looked at, for some of the property, I shouldn't say that, not specifically to any properties, but the conversation has been started, I believe, regarding impact fees
Right.
and that type of thing. And I know there's discussions going on for certain properties in town. It'd be nice to at least kick that off and not wait for it to come and bite us in the butt because we sat on our hands.
Right.
If that makes
Yeah,
sense.
that was, I believe, in kind of an after-the-fact comment, but we can add that to the list if you want that brought up at an upcoming cow, I think.
Because I've talked to a couple District 64 school board members who would like, yeah, I think we have an address for, or if you could get 3 or 4 addresses for some of the new developments that have popped up over time.
Yeah.
We can certainly send those their way, because they want to take a look on their end to see how those developments and changes to zoning that we've done have impacted class sizes and school enrollments and things like that. So that'd be something I'd like to see sped up a little bit based on the fact that there's no urgency on anything else.
Okay, yeah, we can do that. If,
That sounds good to me.
Thank
You know, the city clerk position, we just had an election, we got 2 years for that.
But does it have to be a referendum? Did we check that out? Okay, so we just have to know ahead of time if we're gonna have that, and I know we said we'd discuss it when Betty's here and all that.
Yeah, yeah.
But if we're gonna have that discussion and decide to do it as a referendum, we need to start that process
Right, I
sooner rather
understand.
than
I've
later.
done referenda. Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Just a quick point on Alderman Rand's comment. In other referendum questions that we have put to the voters, one of the things I think we've, past councils, not this one may choose to do it differently, is to try and target elections that have a large voter turnout. So you typically would want to do it in a year where either the governor is being elected, or senators are being elected, or presidents are being elected, president, singular. So that, just keep that in mind, that as we target something, you know, you would hate to have an important referendum question decided on 12% voter turnout.
Good luck getting more, right? All right, so, let's put that point, the issue of impact fees up higher on the list, and take into consideration again, when's the next big election, so that we can do this right. Yes, sir, I'm sorry.
I just have a question perhaps for Alderman Moran, or all of the aldermen in general. A clarification. So for the agenda item, would you like it to be just impact fees in general? Or would you like it to be also related to the impacts that developments have on the generation of school-aged children? Because you
Well,
provided,
a little bit of
or
background
both.
on both probably would be, I think just as a discussion item first, to see if it's something the city wants to bring forward for action. So, you know, what exactly they are, how other communities use them. Yeah, I know when we talked, you said you were kind of shocked that we don't even have anything in our ordinance that allows us to do that.
Yeah.
So some background on that, and then also, you know, if, like I said, District 64, if you want to collaborate with them and come up with, I mean, I'd love to know if the expectations that a developer presents to our zoning boards when they come in here, in terms of, this is basically gonna be all 55 and older retiree living, versus, you know, it's a bunch of 30 and 40-year-olds who have 4 kids that are trying to get in cheap to use the schools. I'd like, because Park Ridge is unique, what might hold up with this type of development in another area might not hold true here, and I'd like to see the results of how those have turned out.
Right. If I may, I'd just like to add, if you want some general information on the generation of school-aged children for various types of development, then please see the staff memorandum for the concept plan review for the Higgins Road development that was forwarded to the Planning and Zoning Commission its last meeting. There's director comments at the end, and I address, just in very general terms, some studies that have been done that have attempted to determine that generation of the impact. We've already started to take a look at staff level on trying to trace or form a nexus between recent developments and the generation of school-aged children, and we'll continue that.
If you're saying studies, I know, it's kind of like a parking study. I know every time an applicant brings in a parking study, it's gonna tell,
Right.
it's gonna say there's enough parking.
Right.
you know, same thing with the developers, they're always gonna say, yeah, this is, the schools can hold the number
Well,
of kids
yeah.
we expect.
Right, read the report.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
I guess, if I could just dovetail on that, I just would like to have a conversation about impact fees in general.
Okay.
Because I think before we get down to the nuts and bolts of, do we want to implement them here in town? I'd like to have had that conversation first, so we all fully understand what they are. And then I think at some point, and I have had conversations with a couple members of the D64 board, as well as the superintendent, that if they are asking for us to impose impact fees, I'd like to see empirical data, not just anecdotal, the schools are crowded, we've got X number of kids, you know, again, we've all heard that, some of us have seen it, but I'd like to see what District 64 has done in terms of studying the issue before we do anything. And I've shared that thought with members of the school board as well as Superintendent Hines as well, that I think at some point, before we do that, they need to show us what they've done. Otherwise, it's not anecdotally isn't good enough.
Last on the list is department head report. All right, I like that. I guess, time to move.
As a reminder, there is no meeting next week, neither Monday nor Tuesday. We are having a special, right, council meeting on the 10th, and then we'll go into our committee of the whole meeting after that. Any new business? There will be fireworks on the 3rd of July at Main East. And then that's it. So no new business? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Good night.